Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is the next video in the RE framework video series with UiPath. All of this we have already covered in the previous videos. We also have explored all the states which are available in RE framework. In case you haven't already watched those, I'll put the links in the description and you can refer that. Now let us go to the agenda for this video. In this video, we are going to see and create a use case. So first of all, we are going to introduce you to the use case. The use case which we are going to build today is called the offer letter generation, that is for the HR vertical. I'm going to tell you what is the problem statement, why exactly are we building this automation. I'm going to introduce you to as is versus the to be process. That means what is the manual process versus how the automation is going to behave. Post that, we are going to see what is the design approach that we are going to take. So we are going to develop this process into performer and the dispatcher approach. The dispatcher would be just loading the data to the queue and the performer would actually generating the offer letter. This is the first video in the use case. So in this part, we are just coding the dispatcher, taking the time in consideration. We would be just completing the dispatcher in this part. After this video, you would have one more video in the continuation where we would be doing the performer. And all of these things we will be again doing by a step-by-step manner. For the videos on this channel, if you go to the description, you have something which is called timestamp. In case you want to jump to a specific section, you can always go to the description and click on the respective timestamp and the video should jump to that section. And also, in case you need the files which are being demonstrated, you just have to email me on the email ID which is mentioned in the description, or you can just drop me a comment. I want to quickly show you what exactly we are going to build today. We are going to have an Excel as an input which will have candidate names and their status as hired, rejected, hired, and their email IDs. There would be a robot who will actually generate the offer letter for each one of the candidate like this. The offer letter is generated by the robot and the robot will also send the offer letter to the respective email ID along with the offer letter as an attachment. So this is the complete use case which we are going to build today. I hope you finding this interesting. So let's get started. The project which we are going to see today is for the vertical of human resources, also known as the HR, and the project is called the generate offer letter. Okay, so now just talking a little bit about this project. What happens whenever a company goes to a campus recruitment or a recruitment where there is a bulk hiring? So what happens that at the end of the recruitment drive, there is an huge list of candidates whom the HR people have to generate the offer letter. Now, since this is a bulk hiring or a campus hiring, the amount of the offers, the term and conditions are exactly the same. The only thing which is changing is the name of candidate, the address of the candidate maybe, and some other details. Now, if you analyze this process from a HR point of view, what they have to do is they have to create the same offer letter for n number of candidates, which is highly repetitive and mundane in nature. Why don't we build this project in RE framework, where with the help of RE framework, we would be having an input sources which will have all the name of the candidates, their details, and we would have something which is called offer letter. With the help of this RE framework and UiPath, we will be building a project that will generate the offer letter via an robot. Okay, so let us see this in action. First of all, to start with any process, we have something which is called as is process. Now, as is process is also known as the manual process, which means that how the process is getting and happening in today's world, right? What is the manual process? How the business is doing the process today, or how the HR people are doing the process. Let us see that. So let's say there are a group of students who are giving the interview. What happens after the interview is done? Though we would be having interview 1-to-1 and n number of interviews, right? After getting the interviews, some candidate would be selected, some would be rejected. Now the HR people would maintain all of these statuses in a spreadsheet. Now let's say they have maintained for all the candidates 1000, 2000, 5000. There may be different recruiters who is taking the interviews. At the end of the day, they collate all the data into a single spreadsheet. Now, once all the data is available in the spreadsheet, the next thing is the HR people have to generate an offer letter. That offer letter is basically generated on a template, because since it is a campus hiring, a bulk hiring, the terms and condition, the details of the offer would be exactly the same. The only thing which would be different is the name of the candidate, some other details, maybe addresses and some other personal details. Once the offer letter is generated, the next thing what the HR people have to do is they have to send an email to the person, whoever is hired, with the offer letter as an attachment, and say that please respond within this number of days to mark it as an acceptance. Right? So this is the manual process which the HR people are doing manually. Let us now try to see how exactly a robot can help us, okay, and how exactly we can introduce a robot which will simplify the task for us. Now, as soon as I implement a robot, the process becomes an automated process. And now the first one which we seen was as is process. So this one we call it as a to be process. That means how the robot is going to do the process when it performs. Okay. Now all of these things, taking interviews of all the students one by one, selecting, rejecting them, all the statuses, maintaining and dumping all the statuses in a single spreadsheet, still stays the manual process. Now where exactly will the robot come in picture? As soon as I introduce a robot, now what would happen? The robot would start its execution once we have the status Excel sheet available with me. Now what exactly the robot is going to do? The robot will read the Excel, which is nothing but the Excel which is having all the statuses of all the candidates whom we have recruited or we have hired. The robot will filter the Excel based on the candidate, that whosoever is hired, whose status is completed, whom to fill the offer letter, there would have some details. The robot will filter the data. Now based on the data, the robot will have the list of students to whom the offer letter has to be generated. So for that, we would have an offer letter template. The robot will go read the offer letter template. It will generate the offer letter template as per the filter data, and the last thing, it will just simply send the email. So now if you will see, now the HR people have to just interview the candidates, and they have to just maintain a single spreadsheet, and they have to keep it at some location. Maybe they can email it to the robot, and now they have to just sit and watch the robot doing its job. Now reading the Excel, filtering, generation of the offer letter, sending the emails to the candidates, everything will be done by the robot. And this is the process what we are going to build today. Okay, so let me show you the files which I have kept for this process. Okay, so I have created a folder in my E colon which I called HR use cases. So let's say this is the offer letter template which I have. Okay, assuming that this is the offer letter which we have to send it to the candidate. So this is just, I have put my channel logo. You can put any other logo or any company logo. This is the offer letter. This is some of the details of the offer, and you would see here the name, address, date, and the name and the employer. So assuming these are the things which would be differentiating for each and every candidate. Now where exactly I am getting this information? Let me go back, and I just open candidate info.xlsx, and let's say this is the file which I have received for today, right? So today we have interviewed around, let's say, 20 candidates. Out of those 20 candidates, this is the statuses. Some of them are hired, some of are rejected, some of hired, and this is their address, this is their ID, first name, last name, right? Now based on this Excel or the spreadsheet, which means I have to send an offer letter to the candidates who are hired, right? Not only I would have to send, first I would have to generate an offer letter. So to generate the offer letter, what the robot will do, the robot is going to use this template. It is going to pick all the items one by one which are hired. It is going to pull that data in this one, generate a PDF form of offer letters, and it is going to send an email to each one of them. Now to send the email, I would require an email ID. So as of now, if you will looking at all of there, I have put my email ID only. In the real time, it would be all the actual email IDs of the candidate. Now if you notice here, I have intentionally put something as blank, right? So this guy is blank, this email ID is not correct, this email ID is not correct. Now what should happen if the email ID is not correct? Now if the robot is not able to do something correct with the process, that means we are going to use a system exception, that the Outlook was not accessible, or the Word template is not accessible, this guy, or the PDF is not able to convert. But let's say what happens if the everything is generated and robot is not able to send that email. And why it is not able to send? Because there is no email ID, or the email ID is incorrect. In all these cases, since this is related to the process, we are going to raise a business exception, right? If you want to know about the system business exception, if you are following along this tutorial, you would have seen that we had a detailed discussion on how system exception differentiate between business exception. If you are coming for the first time, I would recommend you watching that video where we are explaining how these things differentiate and how to use what, right? So for this, we have intentionally put some of the scenarios where I have kept some blanks, kept some email IDs which are incorrect, and the expectation is the robot should raise a business exception. So this is the Excel and this is the template, and based on this one, for all the hired candidates, we are going to generate an offer letter and send that offer letter to their email ID, and all of this we are going to implement in an RE framework. Okay, so now that we understand what is the problem statement and how we are going to build the robot on top of it, that means now we understand what is the as is versus to be process. Now let's have a quick look at how exactly we are going to design this process. That means what is going to be the design approach. Okay, so first of all, I am going to divide the process into two parts. That two parts would be dispatcher and the performer. Now why we are going to build it in two robots? Because we have seen in the previous videos that what are the benefits which I get when I use the two separate robots. In case you haven't already watched that video, I'll put the link for the dispatcher versus performer in the description and you can refer that. For this one, we are going to split the process into two parts. The first one would be the dispatcher and the next one would be the performer. Now what exactly the dispatcher is going to do? The dispatcher is just going to read the Excel. When I say read the Excel, it is going to read the Excel from a designated location. It will read all the data. It will filter out the records whomsoever we want to generate the offer letter. That means whichever candidate is hired, we will put all those data into the orchestrator queues. So if you just look at the diagram which is on the extreme right, this is the diagram what we have explained when we are explaining the dispatcher. That means dispatcher is a process where we get all the data sources, and dispatcher has an ability to load the data into the queue for the further processes, or in other words for the performer to use. So in our process, we are just going to read the Excel, filter out the records and put the data into the orchestrator queue. So this would be our dispatcher. Now coming to the performer, what exactly the performer robot is going to do? Now the performer robot is going to read each and every item from the queue which the dispatcher has filled. It is going to read the offer letter template from a location. Based on the items which it has retrieved from the queue, we are going to generate the offer letter, and once the offer letter are generated, we are also going to send an email to the candidates, right? So now if you just see the diagram at the right, which just talk about that the performer is a process which just take one item at a time from the queue and do the operation on it, right? So in this one, we are going to divide this process into two parts. One is the dispatcher who would be loading the data into the queue, and the performer retrieving the data from the queue and doing the business processes. Okay, so let's see that in action. Okay, so this is my community orchestrator. This is what we are going to use for today's video, right? So let us see what we are going to do now. So first of all, now let's try to build the dispatcher. The dispatcher, as we have just seen, would be a robot which would be reading the data from the Excel sheet, filtering the record and adding the data to the queue. Okay, let us try to build that. I am in my UiPath Studio, okay, and let me just go here and click on the new process. Now here you always has an option to create the dispatcher in the RE framework also. For us, the dispatcher is not a transactional process, so you can always go and convert the transactional process to a linear process and build a dispatcher process also in the RE framework, right? But as of now, I am going to use a simple process for the dispatcher where we would be just loading the data into the queue, right? Now a question arises, how can I convert a transactional process to a linear process in RE framework? I have a dedicated video built on this topic and I will put the link in the description and you can refer that. Okay. So let me just go ahead and call this one as dispatcher process for the HR offer letter, right? What is the description? The description is that this is a dispatcher, right, which is going to load the offer details to the queue. Okay, I'll just go and hit create. It is always a good practice to provide the description of the project. I'll just go ahead hit create. We'll just wait for the dependencies to load. Okay, so the dependencies are loaded. I can just simply go here and click on the open main workflow. Now why we are writing the automation in main workflow? Because this is the point from where the project would start. Okay, if I go to the project, you can see this little green arrow on this indicates that this is the place where the automation is going to start. Now if you remember what we are going to do in the dispatcher, the first thing is I have to read the Excel, the status Excel where the HR would be putting all this data, right? Now how do I read an Excel? To read an Excel, I have two approaches. One approach is to read the Excel with the help of Excel application scope. Otherwise, I can simply use an activity which is called read range, right? I have the Excel installed on my machine, so I have a privilege of using the Excel application scope, right? Now, when I use the Excel application scope, I would have to just provide the path of the Excel that where exactly is this located. Now I have a dedicated playlist on Excel automation where I am doing whole lot of automation on Excel. You can refer that. I'll provide the link in the descriptions and you can refer it. Okay, now Excel application scope expects you to provide the workbook path. Now if you will see here, it is available in my folder, but when I am delivering this to my customer, I cannot put the path like this, right? So as of now, the Excel application scope, if I have to work, you just have to click on this button and in here you just have to go to the location, search here, click on open. Now what might happen, this would work only in my machine. So whenever we do any enterprise level project, make sure you do not hard code here, right? It is a strict no to hard code the variables. What can I do here? Now there are two things which we can do here. The first thing is either I can make use of a configuration file which is called a config file, or otherwise I can always make use of the assets, right? How do I use a config? That we are going to see in the performer part. Let's try to see the other option which is called the assets. If you will look at the bottom, I am connected to the admin folder of the orchestrator, right? So now if I just go back to my orchestrator, this is the folder which I am connected to. I'll simply go to the assets, right? Now if I simply click on this button, add asset, what is the asset which I want to create? I want to create an asset for the Excel path for the offer letters, right? Now why I am creating this path? Because in future if I have to, somebody has to run it or from a different path, they can easily come to the orchestrator, change this asset and the process will work accordingly. I'll just provide the thing here. This is a type of text. We have 4 kinds of assets, right? So I'll just go here and selecting the text one. Okay, I'll just go here and paste it. What is this? This is the Excel path for the status Excel. That's it, right? I just go here and hit create. That's it. Now in my automation, I would just have to use this Excel path, which is this one, right? The one we just created. Go back to the automation. I'll go here and use an activity called get asset, right? That is the activity which we use to get the value from the orchestrator. I'm just drag and drop it here. The asset name would be now the asset which we have just created. I'll hit Control plus K and create a variable which I say str underscore Excel path, because the path of the Excel is going to be a string variable. I can go to the variables and you could see that UiPath would have already created the variable for me of type string. This looks good, right? What is this sequence for? Never forget to name the activities. This sequence is to load the queue, right? What is this asset? This asset we are just going to get the path of Excel, right? And here Excel application scope, we are just reading the Excel. This would help in case I am encountering some exception. All these details would help me, right? That we have seen in the exception handling series, right? How actually naming this thing help, right? Now in here, instead of this guy, all I have to do is just pass this value, which is called the str Excel path. I am telling UiPath that you have to simply go here and read this Excel. Now, how do I read? To read the data, we use an activity which is called read range. See, there are two read range. I am using Excel application scope, so I would have to go with the first one. I just drag and drop it here inside this one. These are the straightforward properties. What is the sheet name, right? Now, what is the sheet name? If I go here, the sheet name within my Excel is status, right? Again, this status can be again stored in the assets. I leave that to you. You can create a asset for the sheet name also, and you can read it from here. Now, once you read the sheet, what exactly you are going to do? Whenever we read a data from the Excel is going to give me all this data in a form of a data table. So whenever somebody asks you what is the output of a read range, it is not string, it is not object, it is always a data table. How do I create a data table? I just go here, hit Control plus K and write dt underscore input data maybe, right? Now UiPath is asking me, do your data have headers? Let me check. Yes, I do have headers, so that's why I simply go and tick this checkbox. Now this automation, whatever we are doing, is going to run in an unattended mode. So when I am running this process from the orchestrator, how would I know that what has went wrong, what the process is doing? That means we have to always use the logs also. So these are the some of the best practices which you should always use whenever you are writing any code. Okay, so let me just go here and I say that I'll use an activity which is called log message activity. Okay, I'll drag and drop it here. I just say info label log and I say that the process has started, right? Once the process has started, I can always say that reading the Excel was successful, right? And if required, you can always print the path. Now make sure when you are printing the path or any information, you are not logging any confidential information. Okay, once the data is read successfully, right, what I wanted to do, I want to print the status also, so that I know that how many items I have got. So I say here read success and the total items in the Excel. So total items, I just say here plus dt input dot rows dot count dot toString, right? I am telling UiPath to read the status sheet, print the column, and I have put some the logs so that I know that what the process is doing. Now I have got the data table, I have read the ranges, I have got this thing from the asset. What is the next thing I have to do? We have to load the data to the queue, because if you remember the diagram, in the dispatcher we have to read the Excel, we have to filter the data and then load data to the orchestrator queue. Okay, I totally forgot the filter one. So first of all, when we read the data, UiPath is going to give me all these data, right? Let us try to see what data I am getting. I'll just go here, put a breakpoint here like this, right? and I'll just go here, and since I am using Excel application scope, I always has a liberty to use the Excel even if I have the Excel open, right? Let us try to see that. I go here and I say debug the file. Now what would happen? UiPath Robot will execute. I am running the automation in a debug mode, and I want to see what data is coming in my data table. Is the read successful? Whether I am able to read the assets or not, right? So you can see that I have got this in the data table, that UiPath was able to read serial number, first name, last name, right? That means UiPath was able to load the asset successfully, and I am getting all these details. Now, okay, so this is cool. We are able to read the Excel. Now, what was the use case? We have to filter out the records, because if you remember the end objective of our automation is to generate the offer letters, and the offer letters would be generated only for the candidates whose status is hired, right? So if you see here, the status is a column which is hired, not hired. So it would be good if I only add the records to the queue where the status is hired. Okay, let's try to do and filter the records. So I'll just remove this breakpoint because this is working for me. Now I can just do this collapse here. I can just collapse this way also. Now what I want to do, I want to filter the records, right? So I can use an activity which is called the filter data table. Drag and drop it here. Filter data table. Why exactly I'm using this activity? To get the hired candidates only. That's it. If you click on this button which says configure data table, it is going to ask me what is the input data table. So the input for me is DT. I am not getting the data table here. Can somebody tell me why exactly that is happening? I want you guys to write in the comment box that why I am not getting the data table here. Okay, so meanwhile I fix it. I hope you guys would have written in the comments. Okay, why we are not getting? Because there is something which is called scope of the variables. Excel application scope, we have read the data table here. If I go to the variables, you can see DT input has a scope only to this do. If I want to use it outside, just increase the scope. That's it, right? I have covered a detailed video explaining the variable scope, arguments, everything. I'll put the links again in the description. You can refer that, right? Okay, now I again go to the configure filter. What is the input? Input is DT input data. What do I want to filter? So after filtering, what do you want in the output? So I say that I hit Ctrl plus K and I say DT underscore hired data. I want to put only the candidates who are hired in this one, which is called the hired data. Now how UiPath is asking me, how would I know which all are hired? So I am telling UiPath that you have to just look for a column whose name is this one, status, and you have to check if status is equal to, what is this one, HIRED. So what exactly is happening here? I am telling UiPath that you filter this data table for the records where the status is hired, and whatever output you get, you just store this output in a DT hired data. Now this is a very good activity if you want to filter out specific columns. So now let's say I want to have only this, this and this. You always can specify the same in the output columns. You can use the numbers here. In the filter rows, you always have an option to add more condition, add, delete. You can write an AND condition, you can write an OR condition, and all the SQL operations, right? So as of now, let's keep it simple. We are just telling UiPath to keep the data where the status is hired and put the data here. I hit OK. Now this activity will do its magic, and once the magic is done, I just want to have a log message where I say that the filtered count of hired employees is this. When I say this, that means DT hired data dot rows dot count dot toString. So why dot toString? Because dot count will give me an integer. To print something as a message, I would have to convert it to string. That's why putting dot toString. Let us try to save this, go here and run the file. Right now the robot has fired up. Okay, execution completed. Let me go to the output. I can see that the process was started. Reading the Excel was successful from this path. That means this I am getting from the asset. The read was successful. Total there were 19. I just filtered it and there are 12 records. Right, so seems like it is working. Right, so now what is the next step? For the dispatcher robot, read the Excel. This is done. Filter the records. This is also done. Now we have to add the data to the orchestrator queue. Now to add the data to the orchestrator queue, if you just go here and type here queue, I have two activities: add queue item and bulk add queue item. Right, so bulk add queue item is an activity which let you to add the complete data table to the queue. Right, otherwise if you want to add the item one by one, you can always use this one, which is called add queue item. Otherwise, if you have a data table kind of something, you can always use the bulk add queue item. So I have a data table with me. I am free to use any one of them. Let me stick to bulk add queue item. Right, so what I am doing here, I am telling UiPath that I want to add the queue items to a queue. Now UiPath will ask me, okay, tell me the data table. The data table which I want to use is DT hired data. Now UiPath is asking me, now you tell me the name of the queue which you want to add the data. If I go back to my orchestrator, I do not have the queue created, right? Because we just created the asset. How would UiPath know which queue I have to add? So for that, let me just go to this tab which is called queue. I'll simply go here and select on this button, this blue button which says add queue. And here I say create a new queue. Now the properties are absolutely simple. What is the name of the queue? So I would just say that this is the vertical, this is the process, right, and offer letter and hired, right? So this is the queue name, HR offer letter underscore hired. So this is the queue which I have created. So I provide a description that queue to have the hired candidates, right? Now I'll just go here, I'll keep this to the default settings. See, if you just notice that I have written the maximum number of retries to 1. That is nothing but in case of system exception how many retries you want to have. So let me keep it default settings and I just click on add. Now as soon as I click on add, you will see I have got a new queue here. As of now all the items are 0 because we have not added anything to the queue. Let me go back to the code. Bulk add queue item, give me the queue name. Now I have the queue name. That's it. If I go to the properties, it's are absolutely simple. Provide the data name, provide the queue name, right? So let's save this and I go here and I just put a log message here. In this log message, I want to say that data added to the queue successfully, right? In here I just want to say that data was successfully added to the queue. So if I go back to the diagram, read the Excel, done. This is also done. This is also done. Now how I am going to run it? Okay, I forgot an important thing. I forgot to do the exception handling. Now why it is important? What is it? If you don't know about exception handling, then there is a must that whenever you are working as a programmer, you should always know what exception handling is, how to do that. A quick way of doing is surround with try catch. And for all of this exception handling and all these details, I have a dedicated playlist on my channel. I'll put the links and you can refer that. Now I am quickly doing an exception handling. I am telling that whatever exception you get, you just log the message, right? And I am telling UiPath that if you get any sort of exception, you just log an error, and you just log an exception, and you just add the exception details here, right? So these details, in case of any exception, would be visible to me in the orchestrator. This is a very high level exception handling, guys. I have done in the real time project. You would have n number of exception handling. You would use throw, strike, catch. You should always know more about exception handling, right? So please refer to the videos which are available in the descriptions. Okay, now I want to run it. Let's try to run it from orchestrator. I would just simply go to the here and I click on the publish button. Now what happened? It is telling me that Mukesh, I'm going to deploy this packet. I am saying the version looks good to me. I just go here and I say publish. Now which orchestrator it is going to deploy? It is going to deploy to the orchestrator my UiPath assistant is connected to, right? So dispatcher HR process is deployed. I hit OK. Let me go back to the orchestrator and I can see here in the tenant, right? If you go, the package should be available here, right? If I just search here HR, I can see that the process is available. Now I want to run that process in the admin folder because this is where we have created the asset, right? So I simply go to process, click on add process, select the package which you want to run, which is this guy, right? Which is the entry point. I have main.xaml, only single entry point. I have a single version. You have a freedom to choose the version also. Leave it to the default setting, no arguments, nothing, and I say create. Now my process is ready. I can simply go to the jobs now, and from here I can always start a job. So if you will see, there are the previous jobs which are running. My queue is not having any items. If I just run this process now, what should happen? The robot should get all these hired candidates and add it to the queue. Let us try to execute that. Okay, I can close this Excel now. I say don't save. Go back to the automation tab. In the processes tab, now I can see that there is a dispatcher HR offer letter process with this version. To run the process, all I have to do is we have to just click on this play button which says start a job. The other option is we can always go to the jobs and start the job from here. Okay, so now to trigger the process, I just go to the dispatcher offer letter process and I just click on this play button. Let me go here and click on start a job. The orchestrator will ask me, let me know in which machine or which account you want to run the process. As of now, I only have one machine, one unattended robot, so I can run it here. In the real-time scenario, you would have different robots, different machines. So make sure you select the process accordingly. Okay, so if I go here and I just click on the start button, that means I am executing the dispatcher process manually. What would happen? The command is now sent to my UiPath assistant. If you could see at the bottom, the green icon indicates that the robot is running on my machine. It would read the items, filter the hired candidates and add those to the queue. Let me go back to the jobs, and this is the place where I would see all the things which has happened, right? So if you can see, the dispatcher HR process was executed a few seconds ago, right? So what was the benefit of using the add log message, right? So if you go here, you can see that we have added this information. So what is the benefit? If you go in any of the jobs, just click on the three dots and select view logs. Now this is the place where your add log would be visible, which says the dispatcher was started. We have read the Excel from this path. There were total 19 items. Out of the 19, there were 12 hired candidates. Then we added the queue item successfully and the dispatcher was ended. This is the benefit of adding the log messages. So as of now, we have the access, right? But what happens if the robot is running in an unattended mode, where you only have this access? So from the logs, I can see that yes, what has happened to the process. An important information here, whenever you are writing any logs, make sure you don't include any sensitive or any confidential information about the client or about the process. For example, don't include the PAN card, don't include the passport information, don't include any transactional information, right? Count and everything is okay. So that's why always make sure that you don't want to log any sensitive data in the logs. Okay. Now this guy says that I have a filtered count of 12 and we have added those to the queue. Let me go back to my folder, right? So this is the folder which we have been working on, admin folder. And in here you see there is an option which says queues. If you remember, we have just created this queue, HR offer letter hired, and I can see that there are remaining 12 items to process. Okay, if I just go here, click on view transactions, so you would notice that all the items whatever we have added are available here. How do I know? I can just click on any one of them and click on view the details. So let me just open the Excel. That would actually give some context. Okay, so if you can see, I'll just open it like this. The first candidate is Dels April. This is the date. Okay, this is the ID, this is the address, and the status is hired, and the email address is this. Okay, so that means the first hired candidate was added, right? And if I just go and filter, I can see that there were 20 and 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Okay, only 12 candidates are hired, right? That means there were total 19 candidates. How do I know? I can see here, out of the 19, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 were rejected, so remaining count is 12. So that means now in my queue I have all the candidate who are hired, right? So if I go here, view the details, you would see all the status is hired. Now what is the next step? I have added all the data to the queue. Now the first thing to remember, whenever you add a data to the queue, the item status would be always in new. This new indicates that yes, the item is ready to process and can be taken by a performer robot. Okay, if the item, so as soon as this item progresses, when this item will be picked by the performer robot, the status will change to in progress. If it is successful, it will become successful. If it has failed, it will become failed, right? And that way the status changes. So remember, first time whenever we add the data item to the queue, the status of the queue item is the new. Okay, now what is the next step? We have to write a performer robot and we have to get all these items one by one. Now I have told always that we are doing a transactional process. Now what happens? All of these individual 12 items are separate transaction. That means if this transaction fail, it has no impact on this one. If this one fail, it has no impact on this one. That means all of these are nothing but the separate transaction. That is why when you go to the queue and you see here, it says view the transactions, right? That means all are separate transaction. So total I had 19 candidates. Out of the 19, 12 are hired. Those 12 we have added to the queue. Okay, so if I just go back to our process, this is the dispatcher part which we have done. We have read the Excel, filtered the candidate, added the item to the orchestrator queue, right? So that means we have read the data and added it to the orchestrator queues. Okay, so that is all for the dispatcher part of this robot. I hope you guys are able to follow along with me. If that is the case, let's see you in the next video where you will be coding the performer and we will complete this automation. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please do subscribe to the channel and happy automation.